We arrived at the beach house just after noon. The sun was heavy, pressing against the windows as if it had something to say. The road trip had taken 4 hours, but my body felt like it had traveled across a season. I always hated the way long drives made me feel, like time was slipping away behind me while I pretended to be excited about a getaway I didn't ask for. My husband, always cheerful, had chosen this house himself. A refreshing change of scenery, he called it. And perhaps he was right. The house was beautiful, simple, clean, open. Whitewashed walls, creaky wooden floors, a soft hum of the ocean somewhere behind the hills. But it was what came with the house that changed everything. Or rather, who? He had arrived just before us. His son. My husband's son from his first marriage, though I'd never thought of him that way. I hadn't seen him in almost 2 years. Back then, he was a quiet presence at dinners, polite to a fault, always slightly removed. Now, older, broader, quieter still, he looked at me differently. Or maybe it was me who looked at him differently. We all exchanged hugs and half smiles in the front yard. My husband fussed over the bags while I tried not to notice how the sleeves of his son's t-shirt clung to his arms. I hated that my eyes lingered. I hated that I noticed. The house had 2 bedrooms upstairs and a guest room below. I insisted we take the upper one with the ocean view. He took the one across the hall. From mine, I could hear footsteps above the creaking floorboards. I could hear the opening and closing of drawers. I could imagine fingers brushing against folded towels and forgotten dust. I didn't want to imagine, but my mind wandered like it always did when I was alone. The strange part is, I wasn't alone. Not physically, but inside. I had never felt more isolated. Marriage, in my case, was comfortable, respectful, predictable. My husband treated me well, never raised his voice, never let things rot. But something in me had been drying up for years. It wasn't love that faded. It was touch. It was that feeling of being wanted without asking. Craved. I could wear lace or silk or nothing at all, and he would kiss me like he was turning off a lamp. Gentle, efficient, affectionate, but never hungry. And after a while, I stopped wanting to be looked at. That evening, I unpacked my suitcase slowly. I'd brought a few things I hadn't worn in years. Delicate slips, matching bras and underwear in soft shades, things that had no place in a life filled with meetings, grocery lists, and Thursday night pasta. I didn't know why I packed them. Maybe a small part of me wanted to feel the shape of myself again. Remind my skin that it used to respond to heat, to friction, to pressure that wasn't perfunctory. He passed by the open door just as I was folding one of those slips, nude with fine lace trim. I turned it into a bundle quickly, but not quickly enough. Our eyes met for a second too long. He didn't smirk. He didn't stare. He just nodded once and walked away. But something in the hallway thickened. The space between us shifted, charged with something unspoken. It wasn't tension. It wasn't desire. It was recognition. Later, as I made my way downstairs for a glass of water, I passed his rucksack by the coat rack. It was half open, careless. Inside, among a tangle of clothes, I saw something that didn't belong to him. My lingerie. The same nude slip I thought I had packed. But no, mine was upstairs. This was a second one. Identical, still with a tag. I froze. Time didn't. I stood there for what felt like minutes, the refrigerator humming behind me like it knew something I didn't. My skin flushed. Not with shame, but confusion. Fear, curiosity. I didn't confront him. I didn't even ask my husband if maybe he had bought me a gift and forgotten to mention it. I just walked back upstairs and lay awake in bed, listening to the quietest house I had ever been in. Even the ocean seemed to hold its breath. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I took a shower, shaved my legs slowly, carefully. I picked out the softest bra I owned. Not the practical ones. Not the ones that made sense. I dressed like someone was watching, or like I wanted someone to. At breakfast, my husband made coffee and scrambled eggs, humming the same tune he always did when he was relaxed. He kissed me on the cheek and asked if I slept well. I lied and said yes. Across the table, his son watched me stir cream into my cup. He said nothing. But when I got up, I felt his eyes follow the hem of my dress as it moved with my hips. And suddenly, every cell in my body was aware that this trip was no longer about family or fresh air. Something had shifted. Something I couldn't take back. I wish I could say I was surprised. But I wasn't. What surprised me was how much I wanted it to shift further. The problem with silence is that it lets your body speak louder. It had been 2 days since we arrived. 2 days of measured steps, polite conversation, and eyes that said more than mouths dared. My husband busied himself with planning boat rides, restaurant reservations, walks along the cliffs. He was trying to make it a vacation we'd remember, and in a way, he succeeded. Just not how he intended. That morning, the water pressure dropped in the upstairs shower. It was a subtle thing, barely more than a trickle. But my husband made a fuss about it, muttering about maintenance and local plumbing. He asked me to test it again, saying he'd check the valves outside. I went upstairs, partly out of boredom, partly to escape the air that had grown too tight in the living room. I turned the handle and waited. A stream of cold water spat out, then stopped. I reached up to adjust the nozzle, and as I did, the door creaked behind me. "I'll take a look," he said. His voice wasn't intrusive. It never was. He didn't wait for permission, but he didn't barge in either. He stepped inside with a wrench in one hand and a towel slung over his shoulder, as if he were part of the house already, embedded in its quiet, in its walls, in its breath. I stepped aside, trying not to show how my skin prickled under the thin fabric of my tank top. The water had sprayed across my chest earlier, and my shirt clung slightly, tracing the lines of my bra. He didn't say anything. He just reached forward, tried the knob himself. A moment of hesitation. Then the pipe burst into full flow, rude, loud, wet. It hit both of us. The spray was sudden, soaking my back and his arm. We both gasped, stepping away, laughing before either of us could think about it. I reached for the towel. So did he. Our hands met. I let go first. He took it, then did something I wasn't prepared for. He didn't hand it to me. He stepped closer, gently placed it around my shoulders, wrapping it not like a nurse or a sibling, but like someone who had watched me shiver and wanted to feel it through his own hands. I stood still, dripping, heart racing. His fingers lingered. I could smell the faint trace of soap on his skin, mixed with something sharp, metallic, masculine, undeniably young. My breathing slowed, then quickened again. He looked down at me, not with hunger, not yet, but with something heavier. Restraint. And then, before thought could interfere, before shame could rise like fog from the floor, he kissed me. Not a question. Not a plea. A quiet, singular fact. His lips brushed mine once, light as breath. I didn't pull away. My eyes closed involuntarily, as if obeying something older than me. He kissed me again, firmer this time. There was no rush, no hands gripping, no clumsy passion, just two people in a too small space, wet, caught between hesitation and heat. I stepped back. Not because I regretted it, but because I couldn't trust myself not to stay. "I'll dry off downstairs," I said, barely above a whisper. He nodded, not apologizing, not justifying, just standing there, dripping. I walked past him, water trailing down my back, soaking the floor. I didn't look back. In my room, I peeled off the wet clothes and stood for a long time in front of the mirror. My reflection didn't look guilty. It didn't even look surprised. It looked like someone who had touched something forbidden and wasn't ready to close the door. I told myself it was the house, the closeness, the fact that we were all thrown together in a space too intimate for distance. But that wasn't it. It was the way he looked at me, like I was made of fire and he didn't mind being burned. Later, as we sat at lunch, my husband discussed kayaking options. He spoke with enthusiasm, always looking at both of us, as if trying to read the room. I nodded, smiled, played my part. Across the table, his son chewed slowly, his gaze dropping occasionally to my hands as they wrapped around the glass of water. Our feet never touched. Our fingers didn't brush. But I felt him beneath the silence like an undertow. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from guilt, but from anticipation. My body remembered. My lips tingled. My breath caught whenever I thought of how close we had been, and what might happen if we let it happen again. The day after, the kiss stretched out like a taut string, quiet, sunlit, humming with invisible tension. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt familiar. The chairs on the patio, the breeze through the gauze curtains, even the rhythm of footsteps on the old wooden floors. All unchanged, but every sound seemed heightened, sharper, almost purposeful. My husband made fresh coffee that morning, humming the same tune he always hummed. I stood beside him in the kitchen, nodding at the small talk, offering the usual responses. My hands moved automatically. Plates, spoons, napkins, while my mind remained in that shower, replaying the weight of the towel around my shoulders and the precise temperature of his mouth against mine. When I sat down, his son was already there. He handed me my cup, fingertips grazing mine as if by accident, but we both knew it wasn't. There was nothing overt, nothing obvious, but under the calm surface of breakfast, something alive was swimming, something we hadn't named yet. I tried to stay normal. I really did. But normalcy, once cracked, leaks everywhere. I wore a long linen dress that day, light, beige, falling just past the knee. I hadn't worn it in years. It hugged my waist gently and shifted when I moved, giving the illusion of softness I no longer felt inside. Beneath it, I chose underwear that no one would see but still mattered. Pale lilac lace, the kind that makes you stand differently even if no one's watching. But someone was watching. I felt his gaze not on my face, but on my movements, on the places fabric touched skin. And I didn't want to hide. I wanted to know how far this thing would stretch before it broke. The three of us drove into town later that morning to pick up groceries. My husband chatted with a local vendor near the produce stand while I wandered toward the back of the market. His son followed without a word. In the narrow aisle between glass jars of olives and imported oils, we found ourselves alone. He stood close enough that I could hear his breath. Not fast, not ragged, just steady, as if waiting. The kind of silence that only breaks if someone gives it permission. "You look different this morning," he said. Just that. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that wouldn't tip the balance. Back at the house, I unpacked the groceries slowly, one item at a time. My husband had taken a call on the patio, pacing barefoot across the wood planks. His son leaned against the doorway, arms folded, watching me sort tomatoes and lemons and herbs I never used. I could feel the shape of his attention, the way it slid along my back, my shoulders, the side of my neck. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there. He didn't speak again until I dropped a clove of garlic. I bent down to pick it up, and when I rose, he was behind me. Close. Too close. "If he weren't here," he murmured. I didn't let him finish. My voice was quieter than I intended, almost mechanical. "But he is." That night, I sat on the bed in my robe long after my husband fell asleep. He'd kissed me goodnight in that habitual way. A soft brush of lips, a hand on my shoulder, a gentle sleep well. I stared at the ceiling, thinking how kindness can sometimes be as suffocating as cruelty. I got up and walked into the bathroom. The mirror didn't lie. My skin looked flushed, eyes darker than usual. I slipped off the robe and examined the marks the belt had left on my waist. I pulled open the drawer where I kept the new lingerie set. The one I thought I packed but hadn't. The one I now suspected he had deliberately purchased. It was still folded, still untouched, still waiting. I put it on. It wasn't about seduction. It wasn't even about him. It was about seeing myself again, fully, without apology. The fabric was cool against my skin, smooth and deliberate, outlining curves I'd ignored for too long. I wrapped myself in a light robe and moved quietly downstairs, barefoot. The night air through the open kitchen window raised goosebumps on my legs. I stopped by the living room, meaning only to sit. But the door to his room wasn't fully closed. I didn't knock. I didn't step inside. I just stood in the hall for a moment, long enough for him to look up and see me. He said nothing, but his eyes dropped slowly, taking in everything. He didn't smile. He didn't move toward me, but he sat up straighter, and I saw his chest rise. I turned and walked back upstairs. There was no touch, no words exchanged. But we had both crossed something that night, an invisible line that polite people aren't supposed to see. And once you cross it, you don't go back. Not without leaving a part of yourself behind. The next morning started earlier than usual. My husband had a business meeting 2 towns over, something he'd mentioned days ago but only confirmed at breakfast. He was in a rush, fumbling with his keys, misplacing his phone twice, checking the GPS like it was an old friend suddenly refusing to speak. I sat at the table with my coffee, barefoot, wrapped in a shawl over my nightdress. His son came down already dressed, a clean navy t-shirt clinging to his chest and jeans that fit like they weren't meant for comfort. He carried himself with that silent ease that didn't ask permission to exist. My husband leaned in, kissed my cheek, and gave a quick nod toward him. "You two don't wait on me for dinner," he said. "Eat whenever. I'll be back late. Midnight, maybe later. Don't wait up." And just like that, the door clicked shut. His absence settled over the house, not like a void, but like a change in lighting. Everything's still there, but suddenly cast in deeper shadows. I didn't speak to him right away. I needed time to think, to breathe. I showered longer than usual, letting the water slide down my spine in a rhythm that felt too slow, too deliberate. When I stepped out, I toweled myself dry without turning the fan on, letting the steam cling to the mirror, obscuring the version of myself I didn't want to see just yet. The rest of the morning passed quietly. We stayed in separate rooms, occupying different corners of the house like two animals circling the same scent. Every time I walked past a hallway or entered a room, I half expected to run into him. Every time I didn't, I felt something drop in me. Not relief. Around noon, I suggested we go to the market. The fridge was looking sparse, and I needed something to do with my hands. He agreed with a nod, grabbing the keys without asking where we were headed. We drove in silence for most of the way, windows down, music low. The town itself was small, sleepy, unremarkable. But on the way back, he turned off the main road without warning. I looked at him, frowning. He didn't explain. The car climbed a short dirt path lined with dry grass and low-hanging trees. At the top was a wide, flat cliff overlooking the water. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet lookout with an old wooden bench and a breeze that carried salt and something floral I couldn't name. We got out of the car. I walked ahead without asking questions, the wind catching the hem of my dress. He followed a few steps behind. When I stopped, I didn't sit. I stood at the edge of the bluff and stared down at the glittering waves. The ocean didn't care what we were doing. Then I felt him behind me. Close. "I wasn't going to touch you," he said. I closed my eyes. "You didn't need to," I replied. His breath hovered near my shoulder, but he didn't step forward. I could feel the tension between us tightening, but neither of us moved to cut it. It was worse than touching. Being that close, that silent, while our bodies betrayed us both. Every instinct screamed for contact, for release, but we held ourselves like glass. He finally spoke again. His voice was even, but his words weren't casual. "If I told you I've imagined this exact moment every day since I was 17, would it disgust you?" I turned slowly. "No," I said. "But it would scare me." We stood facing each other, unmoving. His eyes searched mine, not for permission, but for something deeper. A crack, an opening, a reason not to step away. And I couldn't give him that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I walked back to the car without another word. The drive home was shorter somehow. Or maybe it just felt that way because something between us had shifted again. This time, not with hands or mouths, but with honesty. Brutal, unfiltered, impossible to erase honesty. Back at the house, we unpacked the bags in silence. He carried them into the kitchen while I arranged the fruit and vegetables with mechanical precision, my fingers working faster than my thoughts. That evening, we prepared dinner together. Nothing elaborate. Roasted vegetables, pasta, bread. But the rhythm of the kitchen had changed. Our movements were choreographed unintentionally. I reached for the knife and his hand was already there. I turned from the stove, and he stepped aside without looking. We were in sync, like dancers in a routine neither of us remembered learning. When we finally sat to eat, the conversation was light, sparse. But his gaze lingered longer. And when our glasses touched during a half-hearted toast to making it through the heat, I felt the shiver return. Later, long after the dishes were washed and put away, I wandered down to the patio. The sky was a deep purple, and the sea whispered its rhythm against the rocks. I didn't hear him come out, but I felt it. The presence of him, standing behind me, watching. "I keep trying to make you disappear," I whispered into the dark. "But you keep showing up." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. And for the first time, I didn't run. I just stood there, knowing the next step would come. Knowing I wouldn't stop it. The heat didn't break that night. The house felt swollen with it, as if the walls had inhaled the day and now couldn't exhale. I lay in bed, the sheets pushed down to my knees, the air still and heavy. My husband wasn't back yet. He had texted earlier. Meeting ran late, staying the night at a hotel near the city. "Don't wait up," he wrote. As if I were asleep. As if I could sleep at all. The silence had teeth. It gnawed at the edges of my body, urging me to move, to feel, to do anything but lie still with a heart that beat far too loud for the room it was in. I got up slowly, without turning on the light. My nightgown clung to my back, and I didn't bother brushing my hair. Everything about me felt raw, restless, unfinished. I walked barefoot into the hallway. The wood was warm under my feet. His door was open, just slightly. Not enough to be an invitation, but not fully closed either. I stood there just outside. My body didn't shake, but something inside me did. Then I heard it. Not a voice. Not a call. Just movement. The sound of sheets rustling, a breath held too long and released too carefully. I pushed the door wider and stepped inside. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, as if he hadn't expected to sleep. As if he'd been waiting. His eyes met mine, and in them I didn't see guilt or fear or confusion. I saw recognition again. That same stillness from before. But deeper now. Hungrier. I didn't speak, neither did he. I crossed the room and sat beside him, not touching, not even looking directly at him. The air between us felt like it had its own pulse. For a moment, the room held both of us like a breath just before it's exhaled. Then he turned slightly toward me and I let my shoulder touch his. The contact was barely anything, but it cracked the shell we'd both been hiding inside. He raised a hand and rested it on the back of my neck. Just his palm. No pressure. My body leaned into it instinctively, like it had been waiting for that exact weight. I closed my eyes. The kiss didn't start with lips. It started with the space between us collapsing. His hand moved from my neck to my jaw, guiding my face toward his. Slowly. Carefully. And then our mouths found each other. There was no hesitation this time. No testing. No restraint. Only certainty. Only the knowledge that we had already crossed the line. Now we were just learning how far we'd fallen. The kiss deepened, slow and warm and impossibly soft. His thumb brushed along my cheek, then down the side of my throat. Every nerve in my body reached for him. I felt my knees slide closer, my hips shift, the air around us folding in like curtains pulled tight. Then came the sound, not imagined, not subtle. A key in the door, the front door. I froze. He pulled back immediately, chest heaving. I stood up too fast, my legs trembling under me. My husband. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not yet. I stumbled toward the hallway, my mind already racing for excuses, my hands instinctively smoothing my nightgown. Behind me, he was silent, already erasing himself from the room. I slipped into the bathroom, closed the door without locking it, turned on the faucet to cover the sound of my breath. I leaned over the sink, heart hammering, footsteps downstairs, the unmistakable creak of his shoes, a cough, the rustling of his jacket, then his voice, casual, almost amused. Who was using the upstairs shower? I just fixed the valve this morning. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Through the crack in the bathroom door, I heard my husband call up the stairs again. Something about grabbing water before bed. He didn't sound suspicious. He sounded tired, but every word stabbed. I stayed in that bathroom for longer than I needed to. I splashed cold water on my face, patted it dry, checked my reflection 3 times. My lips were redder than normal, swollen. I wrapped a towel around my shoulders and walked back to the bedroom. My husband was already in bed, half covered, flipping through something on his phone. He glanced up at me and smiled. Everything okay? I nodded. Couldn't sleep. Too hot? Something like that. He reached out, pulled back the sheet for me. I slid in beside him, facing the wall. His arm rested across my waist, loose and familiar. His breathing slowed, but mine didn't. I kept my eyes open long after he fell asleep. Because everything in me had changed. Because my body had just tasted something it couldn't forget. And because I knew this wasn't the end, not even close. The next morning began in shades of gray. A thick layer of fog hung over the sea, muffling the usual sounds of the world outside. My husband woke early and left the bed quietly, slipping out for a morning run without disturbing me. I lay perfectly still, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of last night. I felt as if I'd stolen something and now held it tightly within my chest, afraid someone might notice it missing. Breakfast was an ordeal. I moved carefully, aware of every subtle shift in my body language, every glance I gave and avoided. My husband returned from his run refreshed, smiling casually, oblivious. He poured coffee, slicing fresh bread and chatting about trivial things. Plans for dinner, weather reports, a book he'd started reading. His tone was bright, sincere, unchanged. Across the table, his son moved deliberately, measured, silent. He didn't glance my way even once, his gaze fixed on the cup in his hands or the plate before him. It was as if we'd agreed, wordlessly, to act as though nothing had happened. But beneath the surface, the silence hummed dangerously, charged with memories and unmet desires. After breakfast, I excused myself, retreating to the quiet of my room. I stood by the window, staring out at the mist-covered coastline. The fog concealed everything familiar, turning the view into something new, unknown. I thought of how similar it felt inside me. Everything obscured by uncertainty and longing. For years, I'd lived within clear lines, well-defined borders. But now, everything blurred together, impossible to separate. Hours passed slowly, each moment lingering uncomfortably. My husband announced plans to explore the nearby town alone, promising to return in the late afternoon. The way he kissed my forehead felt strangely hollow. Or perhaps it was just me, suddenly too sensitive to the truth hidden behind everyday gestures. He departed cheerfully, his car disappearing into the fog like a memory fading too quickly. The house fell into silence once again. My steps echoed softly as I moved downstairs, restless and unsettled. The quiet didn't soothe. It amplified every thought, every hesitation, every unresolved feeling. Eventually, I wandered into the living room, intending to distract myself with a book or a magazine. But my hands hesitated over the pages, my thoughts elsewhere. Then, without fully deciding, I found myself standing outside his bedroom door. It was shut firmly now, a subtle barrier drawn clearly. I raised my hand to knock, then stopped, fingers hovering inches from the wood. My heart beat erratically, caught between fear and anticipation. Finally, I stepped away without knocking, retreating instead to the kitchen, ashamed of my own indecision. The afternoon dragged. I made tea and watched steam curl gently upward, dissolving into nothingness. Every noise in the house startled me slightly. The creak of floorboards, the distant sigh of the wind, the ticking of the old clock above the stove. I wanted him to appear, yet dreaded it, equally terrified of what he'd say and what he might never speak aloud. As dusk settled, I moved onto the patio. The fog had lifted, revealing the ocean in shimmering gold beneath the setting sun. Its beauty was cruel now, a bitter reminder of simplicity lost. The gentle rhythm of the waves felt mocking, a steady backdrop to the turmoil I carried. I wrapped a thin shawl around myself, even though the air was warm. My body shivered not from cold, but from the weight of everything unsaid. He finally appeared at the patio doors, pausing briefly as he saw me. I didn't turn, just felt his presence behind me. He approached slowly, stopping a few steps away. Neither of us spoke immediately. We just stood there, letting the silence fill the spaces words might fail to reach. When he finally broke the silence, his voice was low. Careful. I don't regret last night, he said. I closed my eyes, inhaling sharply. I didn't turn around. Neither do I whispered. He didn't move closer. He didn't touch me. But I felt the tension between us ease slightly, like air escaping from a valve, quiet and controlled. We stood together quietly, both acknowledging the dangerous reality between us without trying to erase it. Eventually, he retreated back inside without another word. I heard his footsteps fade, the sound of a door shutting softly behind him. I remained alone on the patio, gazing out at the darkening horizon, the water slowly vanishing into blackness. My heart felt heavy but resolved, aware now more clearly than ever of what I truly wanted and feared. That night, when my husband returned, I pretended to sleep, my eyes tightly shut, breathing controlled and even. He moved quietly around the bedroom, undressing softly, climbing into bed without disturbing me. I lay completely still, my body rigid beneath the sheets, painfully aware of every inch of space between us. My skin felt sensitive, alert to even the smallest movements. Yet I made no sound. Long after he fell asleep, I remained awake, staring blindly into the dark. My thoughts raced uncontrollably, every memory sharp and immediate, every touch remembered with aching clarity. I knew now that whatever happened next would carry consequences neither of us could ignore. The line we had crossed had vanished completely, leaving us both lost and uncertain. Sleep eventually claimed me, filled with restless dreams of quiet rooms and unspoken truths, of hands that reached but never quite touched, of voices whispering words I'd never say aloud. I woke frequently, each time haunted by the silence surrounding me. My heart, however, refused regret. Instead, it longed stubbornly, for the quiet moments shared, for the tenderness discovered, for the connection forbidden yet undeniable. The world outside slept peacefully, oblivious to the turmoil within these walls. But I knew sleep wouldn't come easily again. Not tonight, nor any night soon to follow. The choices made had already reshaped everything around us, creating new realities from old desires. I accepted this silently, holding tightly to the painful truth that whatever came next, I'd chosen it willingly. Morning came slowly, heavy and reluctant. The dawn sun crept through the bedroom curtains, casting pale stripes along the walls. My husband was already up, moving quietly through his routine downstairs, the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee drifting up the staircase. I lay perfectly still, listening to him hum softly to himself. His calmness felt strangely unsettling today, almost foreign. Perhaps it was guilt, or maybe the looming sense that nothing between us could ever be quite the same again. I rose from bed cautiously, wrapping myself in a soft robe that felt oddly protective. Downstairs, I found him standing at the counter, coffee mug in hand, looking out at the sea with a thoughtful expression. He turned slightly, offering me a gentle smile as I approached. It was a smile filled with normalcy, an expression that made my chest ache more deeply than any accusation could have. He set down his cup carefully, reaching toward the small side table nearby. Quietly, almost casually, he placed a small box on the kitchen island between us. It was a simple, unmarked container, the type one might use for storing odds and ends. My heart quickened immediately, sensing danger in its ordinary appearance. I stood motionless, eyes fixed on that small object, afraid to reach for it. Finally, I forced myself to move forward, lifting the lid with trembling fingers. Inside lay the delicate slip of lingerie I had hidden so carefully, alongside a tiny flash drive. My breath caught sharply in my throat, panic rising swiftly, my pulse hammering in my ears. My husband watched me quietly, his face calm and unreadable. His silence felt heavier than any question he might have asked. Without a word, he stepped away, leaving me alone with the box and the painful implications it contained. His footsteps faded quietly into the other room, the sound of a door closing softly behind him. I stood paralyzed, unable to process what was happening. My thoughts raced wildly, confusion tangled with fear. How long had he known? Had he suspected from the beginning? My chest tightened painfully, guilt pressing heavily against my ribs. Yet beneath the guilt lay another emotion, deeper and darker: relief. Finally, the truth stood openly between us, stripped of its secrecy and shame. I lifted the flash drive, feeling its cool surface against my palm, realizing suddenly what it meant. He had seen everything, quietly recording every silent glance, every stolen touch we thought hidden. The camera we had once jokingly installed for security now turned against me, capturing each betrayal clearly and silently. My breath came shallow and uneven as I considered confronting him, begging forgiveness, explaining somehow. But I realized quickly that explanations would be meaningless. He knew what had happened. He understood why. The damage couldn't be repaired through words alone. Slowly, my initial panic began to subside, replaced by a strange calm. There were no illusions left now. No more hiding behind half-truths and carefully constructed lies. We stood fully exposed, each truth laid bare for examination, impossible to ignore or deny. His son had come quietly downstairs at some point, standing silently in the doorway, observing the scene before him. His presence felt different now, distant, cautious, uncertain. He didn't speak, didn't move toward me. Yet the intensity of his gaze burned quietly, a reminder of the connection that brought us here. I felt suddenly vulnerable, exposed in ways far beyond physical. Eventually, he turned and left the room without speaking, footsteps fading slowly up the stairs. I remained alone, facing the consequences of every choice I'd made. The silence around me seemed deafening, filled with regret and unanswered questions. I moved numbly to the patio, stepping into the morning sun. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, vast and indifferent, its gentle waves continuing unchanged. I sat on the old wooden bench, gripping the flash drive tightly, wondering briefly if I should throw it into the sea, letting the truth disappear beneath its waves forever. But I knew I wouldn't. I needed to hold this truth, face it fully, accept its consequences. Hours passed slowly, the sunlight shifting gradually, casting shadows across my skin. My thoughts circled endlessly, trapped within themselves. Eventually, my husband emerged quietly from the house, standing behind me silently for a moment. Then, with quiet strength and unexpected gentleness, he spoke at last. "I thought knowing would break me," he said softly. But it didn't. It just made me understand things clearly. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling tears threatening behind my eyelids. He continued carefully, voice controlled yet filled with sadness. You're free to choose whatever life you want. Just remember, every choice has its cost. He didn't wait for my response, quietly retreating back inside. The patio door closed softly behind him, leaving me alone again with his words echoing painfully. The weight of his quiet dignity pressed heavily against me, deepening my sense of loss and confusion. I remained seated as evening approached, my emotions tangled and conflicted. A part of me felt immense relief. The weight of secrecy finally lifted. Yet beneath relief lay sorrow for all we'd lost: trust, intimacy, peace. Every glance exchanged between us would now carry painful awareness. Our comfortable normalcy shattered permanently. As night fell fully, I finally rose, slipping quietly back into the silent house. I passed his son's closed bedroom door without pausing, forcing myself upstairs alone. My husband's bedroom was dark and silent, door closed firmly, the emptiness inside palpable. I stood briefly in the hallway, caught between past and future, painfully aware that whichever path chosen would hold deep regret. Yet despite fear, uncertainty, and guilt, one truth remained clear within my heart. I had chosen this willingly, fully aware of its cost. My decisions, regardless of consequences, had come from desires too strong to deny. I entered my bedroom quietly, closing the door gently behind me. In the solitude of the darkened room, I finally allowed tears to fall freely. Grief mingled deeply with relief and painful acceptance. Whatever future lay ahead, it would carry scars from today, each wound a silent testament to choices made knowingly, deliberately, and irrevocably. Sleep eventually found me, restless and uneasy, haunted by dreams filled with familiar faces turned distant, rooms now empty, words left forever unsaid. And through the night, the flash drive remained tightly gripped in my hand, holding truths impossible to erase, reminders of paths traveled willingly, and consequences impossible now to escape. I woke up the next morning feeling hollow, my body heavy and aching, my thoughts tangled and exhausted. Sunlight filtered into the room, indifferent to the turmoil of the night before, illuminating the emptiness beside me. My husband hadn't slept here. The untouched pillow beside mine was a cold reminder of the distance we'd now placed between us. I lay still for several minutes, feeling the full weight of what had happened, aware that every decision from this point forward carried a permanence I could no longer avoid. The house seemed unusually quiet as I moved slowly downstairs. The wooden floors felt cold under my bare feet, creaking gently with every hesitant step. My husband's son was already awake, sitting alone at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee in his hands, staring blankly ahead. He barely glanced at me as I entered, his expression unreadable. Neither of us spoke at first, the silence heavy and tense, filled with everything neither dared to acknowledge. I made coffee silently, the familiar routine offering no comfort today. Every small movement, filling the kettle, waiting for the boil, pouring water over fresh grounds, felt mechanical, detached from the turmoil raging within me. My heart beat painfully in my chest, each pulse a quiet reminder of choices made and consequences still unfolding. When I finally turned toward him, his eyes met mine briefly. There was a sadness there now, mingled with uncertainty and regret. I wondered if he too felt trapped in this impossible situation. I sat down opposite him, my hands trembling slightly as I gripped my cup. He spoke quietly, choosing words with careful precision. I've decided to leave today. I think it's the best thing for everyone. I nodded slowly, unable to argue. There was nothing left to say. Our story had burned too brightly, too quickly, leaving behind ashes and silence. I felt relief at his decision, but beneath it lay a deeper sadness, a sense of loss for something that had barely begun, yet already ended. We didn't exchange further words. No promises were made, no apologies offered, just the quiet understanding that our paths had crossed briefly and irrevocably. I watched as he rose from the table, moving quietly upstairs to pack his things, every step away from me echoing painfully within my chest. Hours passed slowly, each moment stretching out unbearably. I found myself wandering aimlessly through the empty house, my thoughts circling endlessly. Memories of stolen glances, whispered conversations, fleeting touches replayed continuously, each recalling vivid sensations now tinged with sorrow and regret. As I moved into the living room, I noticed his half-packed bag near the doorway. Beside it lay a small folded piece of paper. I picked it up slowly, recognizing his handwriting immediately. The note was short, simple, and devastating. I wish we had met in another life. My chest tightened painfully as I folded the note gently, slipping it into my pocket. The words echoed quietly within me, capturing perfectly everything unspoken between us. Another life. One without guilt, consequences, or impossible choices. The afternoon drifted onward quietly. Eventually, I heard his footsteps descending the stairs, steady and resolute. My heart quickened slightly as I turned toward him, seeing him standing there with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He looked both younger and older somehow, burdened yet resolved. We shared a brief, silent glance filled with everything we couldn't express, the connection between us fragile yet undeniable. Then he walked slowly to the front door, pausing briefly before stepping outside. I remained rooted in place, watching helplessly as the door closed softly behind him, the sound echoing quietly through the house. With that gentle click, our story ended. Not dramatically or passionately, but quietly, painfully, inevitably. Evening approached slowly, the setting sun casting long shadows through the windows, each inch of fading light deepening my sense of emptiness. My husband still hadn't returned home, leaving me alone in a house that felt foreign now. I moved restlessly, unable to find comfort or distraction, my thoughts too loud to ignore. Eventually, as night settled fully, I retreated upstairs. Our bedroom felt colder now, emptier. I sat quietly on the edge of the bed, staring at the space beside me, aware suddenly of how profoundly alone I felt. Tears rose silently, blurring my vision, grief mingled with regret, relief tangled with sorrow. I heard the front door open later, footsteps echoing softly below. My husband moved quietly around downstairs, not calling out, not coming upstairs. His silence felt deliberate, creating distance that words alone couldn't bridge. We both knew now where we stood, separate, wounded, uncertain. Sleep eluded me that night, restless dreams blending with painful memories. I tossed quietly, haunted by images of everything now lost. Intimacy, trust, connection. Each thought brought fresh ache, reminders of choices made willingly yet painfully. I rose before dawn, slipping silently downstairs. The house remained quiet, each room holding echoes of what had been lost. I stepped outside, breathing deeply the fresh, salty air, feeling momentarily free beneath the endless sky. The horizon stretched infinitely, indifferent to personal turmoil. The world continued quietly around me, unaffected by individual struggles and regrets. Standing there alone, watching the first rays of sun appear over the ocean, I finally allowed myself acceptance. The paths chosen had been mine alone, guided by longing and dissatisfaction. Each decision made knowingly, consequences accepted fully, despite the pain they carried. Whatever lay ahead remained uncertain. Yet within my heart stirred quiet resolve, a determination to face openly whatever awaited me next. My life had shifted permanently, reshaped irrevocably by choices made willingly. I understood now that true freedom required sacrifice, courage, acceptance. And though pain lingered deeply, beneath it emerged quiet strength, newfound clarity, and willingness to face honestly whatever consequences arose. The morning sun warmed my skin gently as I stood quietly, accepting silently every truth now undeniable. Life continued forward quietly, carrying with it scars and lessons learned deeply, painfully, yet willingly. The days after he left passed slowly, blending one into another without definition or relief. My husband and I moved quietly through the house, each of us drifting along our own isolated paths, bound by silence rather than words. He had returned home the morning after his son's departure, greeting me softly, without accusation or inquiry. He never asked why, and I never tried to explain. We both understood the painful truth that explanations couldn't repair what had been broken. Meals became rituals of quiet coexistence, each of us speaking carefully, choosing words deliberately neutral: weather, neighbors, household chores. Beneath each polite exchange lay unspoken truths, regrets and memories neither dared to voice. The spaces between our conversations expanded daily, filled with tension neither anger nor sadness could fully explain. There were no arguments, no tears, just an overwhelming quietness slowly devouring every corner of our lives. I spent long hours alone, walking along the shore, listening to the steady rhythm of waves washing onto sand. The sea offered no judgment, no comfort, just an indifferent presence reminding me that life moved forward relentlessly, unaffected by personal turmoil. Sometimes, standing barefoot at the water's edge, I wondered how everything had unraveled so quietly, so completely, leaving behind nothing but empty rooms and silent regrets. Each night, as darkness filled the bedroom, I lay awake beside my husband, the gap between us an unbridgeable chasm. Neither of us moved toward the other. Sleep became elusive, filled with restless dreams where familiar faces appeared briefly, then vanished silently. My heart ached constantly, longing for comfort or forgiveness, knowing neither could fully heal wounds inflicted willingly. Days turned to weeks, and slowly, routines returned, each step mechanical and detached. My husband buried himself in work, staying late, returning home tired and withdrawn. Our interactions became minimal, polite but cautious, as if each of us feared breaking something fragile and irreparable. The house grew colder, filled with shadows and unspoken resentment. One evening, sitting alone on the patio as twilight deepened, I felt his presence behind me. My husband moved quietly beside me, sitting down slowly, carefully distant. For several minutes, we said nothing, staring quietly at the horizon as stars appeared one by one, indifferent to our presence. Finally, he spoke softly, his voice carrying sadness deeper than anger could ever express. "I've tried to understand," he began slowly, "to accept it. But understanding doesn't make it easier." I turned toward him, tears rising silently, my voice catching painfully. "I never meant to hurt you." He nodded slowly, eyes filled with quiet grief rather than accusation. "I know you didn't. And maybe that's what hurts most, that you found something with someone else that you couldn't find with me." I didn't respond immediately. Emotions tangled deeply within me. Guilt, sorrow, regret, each emotion pressing heavily against my chest. Finally, quietly, I spoke again. "I lost myself somewhere along the way. It wasn't your fault. It was mine." He exhaled softly, shoulders relaxing slightly, eyes fixed gently on mine. "Maybe we both got lost," he said softly. "Maybe we've been lost for longer than either of us realized." We sat quietly together for several minutes, absorbing silently the truth in his words. Finally, he rose slowly, pausing briefly as if considering further words, then quietly retreating into the house, leaving me alone beneath the stars. That night, sleep evaded me entirely. My thoughts raced endlessly, each memory replayed vividly. Stolen moments, painful revelations, quiet exchanges now permanently altered. I understood clearly, perhaps for the first time, the depth of damage inflicted by choices made willingly yet carelessly. In the early hours of morning, as dawn slowly brightened the room, I made my decision. Rising quietly, I began packing my belongings carefully, silently acknowledging the necessity of this painful step. Each item placed neatly into suitcases felt heavy, filled not just with personal possessions, but with memories, regrets, acceptance of truths impossible now to deny. When morning fully arrived, I found my husband sitting quietly at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee untouched before him. His gaze met mine calmly, recognizing immediately the significance of my luggage. "I think I need time," I whispered softly. "Maybe we both do." He nodded silently, eyes gentle, voice quiet. "Where will you go?" he asked carefully. I paused briefly, considering the weight of my response. "I'm not sure," I admitted finally. "Somewhere I can think. Somewhere I can start over." He rose slowly, stepping toward me, pausing carefully. For a brief moment, our eyes met, sharing silently every painful truth unspoken yet understood fully. Gently, he reached out, touching my arm briefly, his hand warm, familiar, yet distant now. "Be safe," he whispered softly. "And whatever you find, I hope it gives you peace." Tears filled my eyes silently, blurring my vision briefly as I nodded slowly. Then, quietly, I stepped away, moving toward the door without looking back, heart heavy yet resolved. Outside, morning sunlight felt gentle on my face, offering quiet comfort as I placed suitcases carefully into the trunk of my car. My heart felt broken yet determined, filled with grief for everything lost yet hopeful somehow for future paths still possible. Life continued forward quietly, carrying scars deeply etched, lessons painfully learned, yet courageously accepted. Driving slowly away from the house we'd once called home, I understood clearly that some choices carried costs greater than anticipated. Yet despite regret, despite grief, beneath everything lay quiet strength, a determination to move forward honestly, openly, willing finally to face fully whatever truths awaited me. And though uncertainty remained deeply present, though pain lingered undeniably, I felt something quietly shifting within, a sense of possibility, freedom, acceptance of the path ahead. Life would move forward quietly, carrying memories and regrets, but also newfound clarity, courage, willingness to build again from truths finally faced openly. As miles passed quietly beneath the wheels, the horizon stretched endlessly before me. Wide open, uncertain, yet hopeful. My heart, though bruised deeply, beat steadily, reminding me constantly of resilience found quietly within pain, strength discovered unexpectedly amidst grief, courage earned through choices made painfully, yet willingly. My life moved forward quietly now, no longer hiding behind false pretenses or silent denials. Each step taken deliberately, openly, honestly, guided finally by truths impossible to erase, choices bravely accepted, consequences courageously embraced. And within quiet acceptance lay hope, fragile, yet undeniable, promising gently the possibility of healing, renewal, peace found quietly within myself at last.